Good morning. This is the video for 2.4. Last class and in the launch today, we talked about horizontal and vertical shifts on a graph. This video is going to focus on horizontal and vertical shifts from a table. So the same principle applies. So let's start off by copying the general form we've been talking about, which is f of x minus h plus k. We've been defining h as an inside change. And we've also been saying that h affects the inputs of a function, which we're going to see in a really interesting way in this table. We've been calling k an outside change that affects the outputs of a function. So on a graph, we know that h is going to produce a horizontal shift along the x-axis because it's changing the inputs, and that k is going to produce a vertical shift because it's changing the outputs. So how does that look in a table? Go ahead and pause the video to get example 1 copied down. Okay. So example 1, we have this table and we're asked to evaluate f of x for x equal to 1. This is actually something we've been doing since the beginning of the year. So we have an x value equal to 1. I'm going to plug it into my function notation, f of 1. And then in my table, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to search for the x value of 1. And I'm going to see what f of x, or what output value, corresponds to the 1, and we can see it's -7. Okay, so let's take a moment to label. I'm going to be referring a lot to these x values as inputs, and these f of x or y values as outputs. Okay, so f of 4, same idea. What part of the table do I care about? Oh, well, I care when the input or the x value is equal to 4. Right here, when the input is 4, what is the corresponding output? 30. So f of 4 equals 30. So the basic pattern we followed so far, whatever's in the parentheses we say is our input, and then the resulting solution is the output. So the input of 4 corresponds to the output of 30, just like the input of 1 corresponds to the output of -7. And we found all that information in the table. Okay, so now things are getting a little bit more complicated. We're evaluating f of 4 plus 1. So the first thing I'm going to ask is this an inside change or an outside change? This is an outside change because the 1 is outside the parentheses. So I know that somehow my outputs are going to be affected. So let's do the math. f of 4 plus 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is just evaluate f of 4, which I just did in the previous problem. I found that it's 30. So I know f of 4 is 30. And then I'm going to add 1. And I'm going to get the final answer of 31. So in this case, I took my output of 30 from f of 4, and then I just added 1 to get 31. So we can see I actually have a different output than I had in part B, showing me that it's an outside change because the outputs were affected. Okay, so the real important part of this problem is noticing the difference between C and D. So here we have f of 4 and then 1 outside the parentheses. Here we have f of 4 plus 1 all inside the parentheses. So how is that going to affect our answer? Well, in part D, this is an example of an inside change where we know inputs will be affected. So, f of 4 plus 1. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that to f of 5. And then I'm going to look at my table and I'm going to see, okay, where is my input of 5? Okay, there's my input of 5. And what is the corresponding output value? Well, when my input is 5, the corresponding output is 33. Okay, so this is really the key of today, is noticing how C and D are very different problems. So please pause the video here and try to explain to yourself, maybe write this off to the side in your notes, what is the difference between C and D? How does it affect your answer to have the one outside the parentheses versus inside the parentheses? Okay, so the key here is in part D, our input was affected. It turned into 5, and then we searched for a different input in the table. And in part C, we used the same input, but then the output changed because we added 1 at the end. Okay, let's move on to example 2. We're going to use the same table for example 2. We're just going to try some more problems. So pause the video, copy down example 2. Okay, so using the same table, I'm going to start by evaluating f of 1. Looking at my table, f of 1, when the input is 1, the corresponding output value is -7. So f of 1 equals -7. There's the input from my table, there's the output from my table. All right. B, evaluate f of 1 plus 6. This is an inside change. So writing this out step by step, f of 1 plus 6. I can simplify that, combining everything inside the parentheses, to f of 7. And then it becomes a simple problem again. F of 7, I'm just going to search for 7 in my table. When the input is 7, the corresponding output is 50. My H value. And there's the output that corresponds to my new input. Okay. Next is f of 1 plus 6. This is an outside change, so I know something different is going to happen. Let's start with evaluating f of 1. Going to my table, f of 1 is equal to -7. And then, after I've evaluated my input, then I'm going to add on the -6. So -7 plus 6 is going to give me -1. Okay. So again, B and C are very different problems based on whether the 6 is outside or inside the parentheses. All right, and then D and E are kind of extensions of a similar idea, and these show up on your problem set. So quickly to go over D and E. Okay, so here we have 3 times f of 4. So I'm going to multiply 3 times f of 4. In my table, I can see when x is equal to 4, the corresponding output is 30. So f of 4 is equal to 30. 3 times 30 is going to give me 90. All right, and then E, now I have a 3 inside of the parentheses. Let's say, okay, f of 3x for x equals 4. I'm just going to go ahead and plug in 4 for x. So it's going to be f of 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. F of 12. And so this means, okay, when my input value is 12, what is my corresponding output value? Well, if we look over at our table, we can actually see that the inputs given are only go up to 7. So we don't know what happens to this function when you go to like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's no clear pattern that we could follow. So this is actually impossible to answer given the information that we have. So we can say not possible to answer with given information. We don't know what the corresponding output is when the input's equal to 12. We're not given that information in the table. Okay, so this requires practice. Go ahead and move on to worked examples 2.4. You can find those in the page after your launch. The answer key is linked to the home page. Work through these examples step by step, refer back to your notes, and make sure that you're using the answer key to check your work as you go. Good luck.